Welcome back. In today's video, we are going to be talking about Sword of Light and Shadow, and that name is way too long, so we're just gonna call her Z2 or Zerida 2. And this unit is basically going to be the staple DPS, well, at least for the next year, based on what China has right now. And it's a very strong DPS, so if you are, looking to be serious in Apex Arena, you probably should try to get her. And this unit, looking at her talent, she basically has no class advantage or disadvantages. They word it as unit ignores class disadvantage, but this actually also applies to advantages as well. She ignores class basically. And you will deal a bonus 30% increased damage when entering battle. At the start of the battle, you will gain this Blade Soul power buff, which increases your attack by 10% and gives you mobility +2 as well. And upon taking fatal damage, instead of dying, you will revive with up to 50% HP, and this HP restoration will be reduced by 50% with each revive. So that means that this unit can revive multiple times per match, which is a trait that very few other units share. Like the only one I can think of right now is Crimson, the Red Crimson. Yeah, that's the only unit that I remember that has like a restorable revive. So this Blade Soul power ignores immunity and cannot be dispelled, and this basically just means that you cannot block it with unbuffable, and then it cannot be stacked. When an enemy dies, a soul scrap is generated at their location, so this is a terrain effect. After taking action, Zerida can consume one allied soul scrap within a 1 ring range of herself in order to recharge this Blade Soul power buff, which is like, whatever's up here. And this soul scrap has higher terrain priority, like sentence wording is really weird here, but basically it means that terrain has higher priority. So it's the same priority as Arankelmo's portals, and it's higher than things like McLean's water tiles or Hobolandius, I don't know what the thing is called anymore, basically the mobility tile, or even things like Liko, if Liko is still being played right now. So yeah, it's a higher priority compared to those. So talking about her skills, one cost, you will basically always bring this thing, there's no contest, Lightning Slash. So there's no real slashing involved in this skill, because what it does is it's an active teleport skill which you can use to target your allied unit or a soul scrap terrain effect, friendly soul scrap terrain effects, and you'll basically teleport next to it while you gain an immunity to all debuffs buff, and you will get 20% attack for 2 turns. So this basically means that at least for attack buff, she doesn't need an external strengthen or flexion buff. This teleport will kinda just give her that attack buff. And after you teleport, you can move an additional 3 blocks and attack. So this is basically her initiation tool. She doesn't need to actually go in herself. And you can this is kind of similar to Light of Genesis teleport, but for Zerida, she can only move a fixed 3 blocks. So do note that with this skill, you can actually target yourself as well. So you can kind of run in front and click the teleport on yourself, and then you move the another 3 blocks. As for her 2 cost skills, Air Slash is a normal skill which I don't need to explain, Sword Soul is Sword Soul. She has a new unique skill, which is Edge Drop Slash. It's a 2 cost AoE skill that does 0.3 times AoE damage to all enemies within a 2 rings range, and it will give them a debuff that reduces their damage by 20% as well as prevent them from triggering any act again effects for 2 turns. So this is kinda similar to Leonhardt, I guess, and it's very strong against a lot of units currently if they don't have any form of these spells. I just think of Lost Hand, even McLean, and especially Gintoki. Like if you land this debuff and he doesn't dispel it with a healer or his Mimir, when his own teammates die, they won't trigger the act again. So it can be a very useful option if you're either playing a AoE draft, or if they don't have this spell and this debuff is significant for you to bring it, then it's pretty nice. But if you are just thinking of doing single target damage, Air Slash can be nice because when you revive, you're kinda at low HP and you don't really want to like melee attack and take counter, then this one can be kinda nice to help you regain your revive without taking counter. But if you need a strong attack, then Sword Soul is probably the way to go, like especially if you need to dispel buffs. Flash, I mean, it's not a bad skill because it has low cooldown, but you will almost never bring this skill compared to the other two. And no. So for 3C, there's a passive component where after you take action, if the hero has this Blade Soul power buff, you will deal a 0.1 times AoE chip damage to all enemies within a 1 ring range and restore 20% of your unit HP. So that's pretty nice, and this AoE damage, it's just a little bit of chip damage. Whereas the attack component of this skill is basically a Sword Soul type skill. Single target damage, dealing 1.8 times damage, dispel 5 buffs, and this skill will apply this exhaustion debuff, which basically blocks any revive effects from being triggered. And this debuff lasts for 2 turns and cannot be dispelled, but it can be immunized by things like Frozen. And additionally, if this hero has Blade Soul power, they will attack first in this battle. And yeah, this effect will only trigger in PvP modes. So it's pretty nice. So without the buff, this is basically just a Sword Soul that prevents revive. You put that debuff, so it lasts longer than this attack. So even if you don't kill them with that one attack, if this debuff lands, you can use a follow-up attack and kill them. So instead of 3 hits, you only need to take 2 hits. So that's kind of nice. And then if you have the buff, you get an attack first. That's about it. Otherwise, it's actually pretty similar to Sword Soul. As for her class, you will mostly be running her in Demon class because she ignores class advantages and disadvantages. So, there's no reason to not take the class with higher stats. And as for Mastery Stones, I'm going for a crit damage build. That's why I have skill, crit and crit damage. But if you don't want that, you want to go for a bulkier version, you can go defense, like suffered crit or whatever you want. For soldiers, there are basically only 2 main options: Steelman Werewolves and Barbarian Warriors. Steelman Werewolf is the most common troop option because it does a lot of damage, it's pretty tanky, and most importantly, it has self-sustain because you will heal every turn and after attacking. But strictly speaking, in terms of troop techs, Barbarian Warriors will generally do the maximum amount of damage as long as your HP is higher than theirs. So, depends on what you want to do, right? If you are trying to kill a tank, sometimes at lower stars maybe you might find the werewolves insufficient to finish off the job. Then you might want to consider Barbarian Warriors, but generally at 6 stars it won't really be necessary and you would much rather have the sustain effect from the werewolves. But do keep in mind that this is an option as well, as long as you can maintain your HP percentage. As for the other troops, they are all pretty ass. Like this Gallant Duelist, the new troop, unfortunately doesn't quite match up to Barbarian Warriors because it has a lower attack increase. Crit rate is kind of whatever, it doesn't really matter unless you're trying to trigger sneak attack or something. And then this RNG % chance to take decreased physical damage is whatever. So unfortunately this troop is not for her. So werewolves and barbarians. As for equipment, I would recommend this set. I find to be the best for her. And this set basically is Crystal Slinger, Insidious Pendant, Meteor Enchant, and the purpose of this build is to kill tanks in combination with her anti-revive 3C. So the reason why this unit is running Pendant is because in the hardest matchup, which is against Guardian Infantry Lightbringer, it is necessary for Zerida to crit their Guardian Infantry. So her attack is a faster one, and therefore she will spend a lot of attacks on her troops. And it is necessary for her to crit the Guardian Infantry in order for there to be a chance to kill. Usually if you crit, then it's kinda up to your troops to finish off the job. And generally at higher stars, if you crit, it will be a kill unless it is a very, very bulky Lightbringer. And that's why we come into the Insidious Pendant. So this is the accessory in the game that gives the most amount of crit chance because it's base skill, it has all stats, and it increases crit by 5%. One thing to note about this build is that you actually do need a significant amount of crit on this accessory. Like, you cannot run this with just attack, because in order to crit cap, I don't have the mass at 6 stars because mine is only 4 stars, but taking into account the extra skill you get at 6 stars and the crit chance from your Thor Covenant, you'll probably need around at least 10 to 12% crit in order to hit the crit cap, alongside with like Stinger's 10% here and the Meteor's 7% crit chance. So, you know, like, it's nice if you get more attack as well. Like, mine is 15 and 7, which is, I would say it passes. Like, I'm just going for crit, and you know, it's kind of hard to get more attack for the same amount of crit. But if you can get like 10% attack with around 10% crit, that is probably okay as well. But yeah, do keep in mind that this build actually requires you to have crit enchants. So as for the rest of the gear, Fury of Tyr is just, you know, a very common DPS helmet, you know, small damage. And Nebulous Robe is just to try and counteract the Holy Arc Thorns build that some tanks are starting to run. So far I've actually died to a Guardian Infantry Landius with Nebulous Robe before if it procs Thorns, but I'm not sure if that is just because I'm at 4 stars currently. Like at 6 stars HP maybe I can survive barely, but we'll have to wait and see. But so far, with the Nebulous Robe you can tank just Holy Arc fairly comfortably, and if you don't have Nebulous Robe, I think you might just straight up die to the Arc Landius, at least at lower stars. And if you don't want to run this build, like so-called like all-in tankbuster build, there is an option where you can kind of run Demon Slayer in order to pair with 3C's mini AoE, and you know, basically it's more like a tank push option because you tend to stick around for longer, so you can get more AoE spins off. I like to call these kind of small AoEs spin because, you know, it damages enemies in one ring around her, so yeah, it's like a spin. And you can basically end up applying quite a lot of debuffs and dispelling with the Demon Slayer. For armor, like if you are not going for Nebulous, Tenyo Robe is one of the more common options that I've seen right now. And basically it's just like a defensive armor similar to Forbidden's armor or Defender. Like, she can actually wear heavy armor. But the benefit of Tenyo Robe is basically you get 10% HP on the gear effect, whereas Defender you get defense and magic defense, I think, in exchange for a more consistent, you know, RNG effect. Like, it just straight up reduces 20% of damage. Whereas for Tenyo Robe, you know, to trigger that thing, like after the RNG, you need to dispel an important buff and also apply a important debuff if they don't have an immunity. So the effect is not as consistent, but it comes with base HP. As for the helmet, you can choose to run Tenyo Headdress if you want, because she does tend to stick around at the back quite a bit. So you could apply some Tenyo effects, but I think Tyr is quite necessary for her to do damage, like to secure her one-shot. And for accessories, I think, you know, if you're going for a bulky build, Overlord's Badge is a no-brainer. And the important thing to note here is that this unit ignores class completely, so you actually don't benefit from running things like Judge Talisman for AoE or Slayer's Emblem, because that effect just doesn't work. But you do get the 8% attack, so, you know, it's kind of up to you if it's worth running if you don't get the effect. And for enchants, you can either choose between, you know, other than Meteor, you can choose between Clock and Breeze. So Breeze is kind of not necessary for her depending on how you play, because she tends to initiate with her 1C teleport anyway, which, you know, allows her to directly jump on something. But Breeze does help if you don't really have a good initiator and you need her to run in herself. And Breeze does stack with her talent, so, you know, Breeze can be nice if you end up playing her that way, like as a self-sufficient initiator. But if you don't think that's necessary, then you just go for Clock, right? Like, I mean, if you're not running Meteor, you're not running Breeze, you're just gonna run Clock. Like, you can run Full Moon. I don't think Full Moon really does anything for her though, so might be better to just be able to clock her 3C or her AoE. So there's a couple of things that I can demo here. First up is, you know, teleportation effects in general. So this applies to a couple of other things, which is Yenne's Portal and Wehttam's Teleport as well. So it's just to like, you know, make sure you know where you will end up after you teleport. So for now, let's say the teleport target is this carry through right here. So if you are teleporting from anywhere other than the same row, you will end up in that direction above or below. So if you teleport from where Zerida is right now, you will end up above him. And if you walk all the way down to teleport the same cavalry, you will end up below him. Whereas if you teleport from the same row, you will end up in front or behind him, depending on how you look at it. And I will just demonstrate all three. Like right now, I'm above. I will click on him, and I will end up above. If I walk all the way down and I teleport, she will end up below. And the only way to allow her to end up being on the same row would be to teleport in the same row. So what this means is that it's actually very difficult for Zerida to actually end up like on the other side of the same row, because unless your Zerida can already run towards this direction, actually no, that doesn't work, because you will literally need to be in front of him to end up on this side. Even if you are in front of him, you will still end up above. So yeah, that's basically for, you know, like trying to estimate where you end up if you teleport on a unit. If you teleport on a soul scrap effect, then this won't matter, you will just end up directly on top of the soul scrap. So finally, I just want to talk a little bit about, you know, interactions between their terrain effects. So this is basically something I've seen in a like other server playoff game, and you know, for example, it's like, let's say you have Yenny and you have Zerida as well, and you're playing against an opponent Wehttam. The opponent Wehttam comes in, kills your unit, and then he just sits on top of the portal from your Yenny. And it's actually kind of like a tactic, that's something you might want to watch out, because with the Wehttam, let's just imagine this is a Wehttam. If he's just chilling on the portal and you kill him, your Zerida will trigger the soul scrap and it will end up erasing your portal. So like, you know, this is just a very specific interaction that I want to go over. Like, you can kind of make use of this in your games, you know, depending on your draft, but you know, just be aware of this tactic. And I think that's mostly all I want to cover about Zerida's mechanics. So thank you guys for watching, see you guys in the next one, peace.